Broadcasting from the basement of La Penta, this is WICR.
Hello, Iona College. We are back with Lights Out Sports. I'm your host, Rob Voncardo, on this beautiful Tuesday morning with my co-host, Armand Matteo. And Armand, how you doing today, pal?
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good.
Ready for some World Series
Yeah,
tonight?
I'm ready for the Royals to win.
The Royals are not winning this series, Armand.
I hope so.
Well, guys, obviously tonight, Game 1 of the World Series, 8 o'clock tonight. We have the New York Mets taking on the Kansas City Royals. Last time the Mets have won a World Series in 1986. The Royals in 1985. And we start off tonight, Matt Harvey going up versus Edison Velasquez. And I thought to go into the series, we should break down what teams are going to have to do to win this series. So we start off, Armand. We look at the New York Mets. We come in this way. You know, their pitching is going to have to go long, lasting long. We're going to have to see them going deep in games. You know, Kansas City is a team that gets hot right away, and they can hit the long ball. They get a lot of extra base hits. But with the New York Mets, their pitching is going to have to go at least 6 to 7 innings at most. And they're going to have to rely on a lot of off-speed because Kansas City is a team that blasts the fastball. One thing I'm worried about in this series is a pitcher like Noah Syndergaard, who constantly could clock between 95 to 97, who doesn't throw that off-speed pitch. So that's one thing I'm kind of worried for when it comes to the New York Mets.
Robert, you just stole what I was literally going to say. I think that's going to come back. Like you said, I think that's going to help be an asset for Kansas City throughout the series. They're fastball hitters. Very good observation by you. Mm-hmm. And I think they're going to win tonight because Matt Harvey likes to dominate people with his fastball.
Well, I mean, we could argue.
I mean, he's got an off-speed, though.
He did develop the changeup. We look at versus the Cubs. He did use his changeup quite a lot of times, which Terry Collins is going to have to say to him, you're going to have to throw this to them. Because you don't want Kendra Morales. You don't want Moustakas going deep off of you. These guys, Eric Hosmer, they all hit the long ball no matter what.
I think for the Mets side of the view is that the Mets are going to win this because Kansas City, the pitchers, for example, they're kind of erratic. Mm-hmm. You know, they're not very command friendly of the strike zone. Mm-hmm. Especially someone like Edison Volquez, who has when you play the Mets, you gotta keep the ball low and out of the zone. Mm-hmm. Because the Mets, they don't have the best eye. They will go for it. Mm-hmm. You keep the ball high to someone like Cespedes, Daniel Murphy. They're going to take it long, as we've seen in the past. So you got to keep it low, and you can't walk them.
Well, here's the only problem. When you just talk about Cespedes right now. He struggled versus Kansas City because originally, you remember, he started off with the
he
Detroit
played them
Tigers.
like 18 times a year.
So he struggled at times against them. But this coming into the series, the Mets, one thing I have to say versus Kansas City, very weak rotation. We look at Game 1 and Game 2. You have Johnny Cueto starting Game 2. Then it just drops. Game 3, you have Ventura, hard thrower. Game 4, Chris Young, who just a surprise to even see him pitching in a World Series. But the Mets are going to have to do what they've done versus LA and Chicago, which is jump on, score the run quickly.
Exactly.
Because we look at what Kansas City did versus Toronto. Why did Kansas City beat Toronto? They scored runs early. They got them all rallied up. They got like 7 runs, 6 runs early, and that was one of the biggest issues. The New York Mets are going to have to jump early because you know what? Coming in versus Kansas City, you don't want to go against their bullpen of Greg Holland and Wade Davis. Davis and Holland controlled it last year going for Kansas City in that miracle run.
And Kelvin Herrera, too.
They controlled it. You don't want to go up versus that
7,
bullpen.
8, and 9. That's the only upper hand Kansas City actually has in this postseason. If they're winning after 6, the ball game's over.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
but the thing is, I think the Mets are gonna need to keep that offensive momentum that they've had since August. They live and die. They can hit the long ball, the Mets.
Here comes the only problem, though. We look at what Daniel Murphy had done before this, going into the NLCS. He has 6 home runs in 6 straight games. Now you look at it, the weekend's off. You're coming in Tuesday.
Oh, yeah.
That's a total momentum killer.
Exactly.
So he's going to have to start off hot now again, which is, I think it's a big
hard
killer.
To do.
Yes, you know what? One thing I have to say I like is you're playing in Kansas City. So you're playing in hot weather, which is actually terrific. You don't want to be in New York at the moment right now where the weather's dropping in that 50-degree, 40-degree range. You're wearing all those tight clothing. Even the pitcher is going to struggle at times, but as a hitter, you're going to be cold in that series. Coming into Kansas City, your bats are going to be flying.
Exactly. I mean, and Kansas City is a hitter's ballpark. It is, but you just gotta carry the momentum offensively because Kansas City, they can do more than just hit the long ball. Kansas City likes to thrive off getting runners into scoring position. They can steal better than anyone in the game.
Almost definitely. You have Lorenzo Cain, perfect example, who guy just gets on base.
Hits the ball in the gap and just goes.
Take third.
He could turn a single into a double. I mean, they have each position is just full of depth for Kansas City, and they can have guys that come up and they can hit off the bench like Alex Rios. I mean, they have guys who are veterans on this ball club that can hit in any type of situation. And they've also been. This is basically the same team from last year, except from pitching wise, hitting wise. Oh, I got an ESPN alert. But I don't know. I think tonight Kansas City is gonna win though, because for some reason I feel like Matt Harvey is just gonna try and over-dominate people with his fastball, and it's going to come back to haunt him.
I don't know. I think he's going to go more off-speed. I mean, we have our opposing views on that.
If he does, then the Mets are going to win.
But my final question for this segment is, we go into this right now. You have your X factors for each team. Who do you think has to be the biggest factor on the New York Mets? I mean, yeah, you could choose any pitcher you want, any hitter. Who would you choose right now at this moment?
Honestly, I think it's going to be Curtis Granderson for the New York Mets. I feel like Curtis Granderson is the table setter. I mean, you can say Daniel Murphy was the GOAT and everything during that last series against the Cubs, but Curtis Granderson is the guy throughout this whole postseason, I feel, besides Murphy, who's been the table setter. He's been getting on base. He's been stealing bases. There was a couple situations where Curtis Granderson would steal third base in a playoff game, which is very hard and a tough call to do, and he's able to pull it off. And Curtis Granderson, this is a different Curtis Granderson from his New York Yankee days. Curtis Granderson, as a Yankee, was horrible in the playoffs.
He hit the long ball, but then come playoff time, he couldn't see anything.
I don't care about him hitting the long ball. I want him to get on base. Because you hit a long ball, that's it. I mean, that's all Curtis Granderson was for. He strike out or hit a long ball. Curtis Granderson for the New York Mets, he's hitting singles. He's stealing bases. He's doing more for the team. And I think Curtis Granderson, batting and as the leadoff hitter that he typically bats for the New York Mets, is probably the most vital piece for the New York Mets that you wouldn't think of.
Oh, most definitely. Hopefully he continues what he did last year.
And for the Royals, I think it's Ben Zobrist.
Ben Zobrist.
Because Ben Zobrist is that all-around guy. He can play left field. He can play right field. He can play second base. He's a hot bat. He can hit the ball in the gap. He can hit the home run. The guy is a very underrated player. He's one of the best utility men ever to play in the game of baseball itself.
Almost definitely a big trade acquisition at the trade deadline.
And Zobrist, believe it or not, Zobrist's been in this situation before. Tampa Bay, he turned Tampa Bay to the World Series. Yes, they didn't win, but he was the leading. Him and Carl Crawford were the best players in that team, and Longoria. So, with that being said, Zobrist knows how to lead a team, and I think that he and Granderson are the X factors in this series.
Most definitely, nice choice for players.
Who do you got?
For the New York Mets, I know we said one. I'm going to actually go with two. I'm going with Steven Matz, and I'm also going with David Wright. Now, my reason for David Wright is obviously David has struggled in the playoffs. NLCS, we saw him more again, the bat on the ball, a lot of movement, getting the ball to the outfield. And you know what? It's going to come around, that means. That means eventually David Wright is going to come around and get some more RBIs. I think he has 3 RBIs so far this postseason, but I think pretty soon we'll be seeing the David Wright we've been waiting to see.
And most of that was against the Dodgers. He had one big game in the 7th. He had that RBI single.
And then also with the Mets, it's Steven Matz. Yes, we look at Steven Matz last series in the NLCS. He pitches one game versus the Cubs in New York. He lasts 4 2/3 innings. And you know what? Honestly, I felt it was wrong for taking him out. I know he was getting a lot of people were jumping on him. The 3rd inning, he got jumped on, and Terry Collins just went, "Oh, we got to win it. We got to sweep them." But we look at it now. Oh, my bad. He pitched in Chicago. My bad. He has to go the distance. This is Matz's moment. Matz has to show what he was brought in for. He has to be that pitcher who goes 6 or 7 innings. I look into his eyes. There's no fear. There's no fear in Steve Matz whatsoever. The kid could do it. And I have a feeling in this series, he's going to come up big versus the Mets. Especially going against Chris Young. He's going to come up big. Matz throws any kind of pitch out there. He doesn't focus on using one pitch his whole game. He dominates with every other pitch, which makes him a lot different from any other Mets starter in this postseason. Going over to the Kansas City Royals side, the person who has to be the X factor in this series, Johnny Cueto.
I knew you were going to say that.
Hands down. You cannot be the man who comes out great one game, throws 8 innings versus the Royals in the ALDS, and then be the guy who shows up in the ALCS and throws 2 innings. You were brought here for a reason. You dominated with Cincinnati the past year and then the past half year for this season before you get traded. You had to show what you were made of. That's what Johnny Cueto was brought here for. Johnny Cueto wasn't brought here to be a long-term player in Kansas City. He's brought here for now to win a championship, and now is the moment that he has to come up big for these teams. But, I mean, we're going to see it tonight. Velasquez versus Harvey. You're going with the Royals. I'm going with the Mets. I think it's going to be a terrific series. I'm seeing it going 6 or 7 games, and we can only wish the best for both teams, right?
Nope, just the Royals.
Just the Royals. So we just gave you guys our breakdown of the World Series between the New York Mets and Kansas City Royals. When we come back from our commercial break, we'll break down the NFL, our weekly recap, and we'll talk to you guys about some of the big games from this week. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
You're listening to WICR.